All right, so welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, I want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. A few questions came in. See where they go. So one question came in, multiple parts of the question. But question was, basically, why do we do what we do? What's the mitzvah? Why do we do it in front of God? Learning, all these things, right? I mean, a lot of other things, part of the question, but basically, simple answer is that God gave the Torah to Jewish people, right? God spoke on Mount Sinai. And he gave us a book that was written, or let's say better, was transcribed by Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moshe himself. And we keep what he says. Now, at the same time, there was also an oral Torah given, what we call Torah Sheba'al Peh, oral law. And what is oral law? It's a commentary in the Torah. Right, it was also given on Mount Sinai because even though the Torah is a law book, the Torah doesn't give me definitions. Right? 100% doesn't give me definitions. So the Torah can tell me, okay, chapter 24, book of Leviticus, tells me about the holidays. The Torah tells me to sit in the sukkah. Got an obligation to sit in the sukkah. Only problem is I got no definitions. Does it have walls? Does it have a roof? What does it mean? Right? And then it says, Torah says they're going to take, certain things in front of God. Right? I have to take palm fronds, a nice smelling fruit, which I'm sure most people are not going to think it's a lemon on steroids. You have myrtle leaves. You have willows. Right? The whole question, what does all this mean? What does it mean to be brought in front of God? What happens if it's dried out? What if I'm missing one? What if part of it's cut off? No definitions. So I need oral law. Right? Oral law is going to tell me what these things are and how I do them. So essentially, why are we doing what we're doing? We do what we do. Well, we'll say because God said it, we do it, and that's it. Right? That'd be simple. A simple explanation. But that's, God gave us the Torah. We have obligations. Jew has obligations if he's born a Jew. He's got to keep the whole Torah, whatever applies. Whatever we have to do. A non-Jew, they can take on the Noahide laws. They have no obligation to convert. If they're obligation to convert, if they want to, okay. So then they can take on all the commandments as well. So we're doing what God says. But we have to keep in mind one thing. A, we're not robots. We have free will. We can make good choices. We can make bad choices. There will be repercussions, certainly for what we do. What we have to realize as well, and that is that even if I've been doing it for a long time, Torah's got to be fresh. Can't do things by rote. Sort of my Hasidic side here coming out a little bit. Got to be excited about what we do. Even though it might be hard, even though we've done it over and over again. We pray the same thing over and over again. Which people have a little bit of problem with that. Then why can't I say my own prayers? No one says you can't. Protestants can certainly say their own prayers, but the rabbis fixed the prayers for a reason. And they understood what the needs of people are. The person would say, well, maybe I should only pray either when I need to. Well, the problem is then you're not going to pray that much. You're not going to feel the need to pray. Here we got a golden opportunity. We have a golden opportunity to ask God for our needs. Whatever we need, physical needs, spiritual needs. Plenty of things. Plenty of things we need. So it's a golden opportunity. Does that mean I can't say my own prayers? No. Certainly doesn't mean that. I can say my own prayers also. Right? Again, there's a structure, which I think people have a hard time with. So I'd answer like this. My simple explanation would be is that when these prayers were organized a lot by the men of the Great Assembly, the men of the Great Assembly included prophets. There were prophets as part of the men of the Great Assembly. So my simple explanation is, and people can take it for what it's worth, and that is that these great individuals, these great people, many of them had the ability to bring back the dead. They could bring back the dead. Now, they couldn't do it because the generation wasn't worthy. But I would venture to say, if they would tell me anything to do, why wouldn't I listen? You're going to say, oh, they're very, very smart. It's more than being very, very smart. Right? They had, certain knowledge and worked on themselves to such an extent, they can do things that certainly are above nature. Doesn't mean they're God. Right? Let's make no mistake. But that's, they were able to do certain things based on how much they worked on themselves in spiritual terms. So again, I would say, if that's the case, then whatever they tell me to do, I'm going to listen. Now, that might not be a good answer for everybody, but I think, if we understand a little bit of who these people were and what they're capable of, then what that means is whatever they tell you, that's what we're going to do. People are going to say, I don't want to listen to the Torah. Why would I listen to flesh and blood? Why would I listen to man? Because the Torah tells me I have an obligation to listen to the Kohanim in every generation. Right? I have an obligation to listen to the priests in every generation. When they say what's right is left, left is right. Who are the priests today? We don't have a temple. They're not serving in the temple today. We don't have a temple. Can't bring sacrifices. Right? But who are the Kohanim today? The rabbis. And without them, we wouldn't know how to do anything. Right? Passed down generation to generation. And they have the ability to certainly interpret the law. Right? But they can't go outside certain boundaries. Right? Because people will say, come on, it's only their opinion. Okay? It's only their opinion. But see, there are certain boundaries you can't go outside of. Right? One of those boundaries is you cannot go against what Moshe says. Can't contradict what Moshe says. Can't add and subtract. Can't add and subtract to what the Torah says. Adding and subtracting means I add an extra tzitzis to my tzitzis. I add an extra compartment to my tefillin, phylacteries, whatever you want to call them. That's adding to the Torah. By making a fence around the Torah, protecting the Torah, so we won't come to a worse prohibition, like many of the laws of Shabbos, that anything similar that was done in the tabernacle and the Mishkan going to be forbidden, because the rabbis didn't want us to, go against or do something close to a Torah prohibition. So they said anything similar you're not allowed to do. It's an offshoot. But people are going to claim, come on, that's adding to the Torah. It's not adding. Again, we're not making new compartments here. We're not adding tzitzis. A fence around the Torah doesn't mean I add to it. That people have an issue. Certainly, what the rabbis bring down and what they say and how they explain things in the Talmud, another part of the question, right? What's the whole point? That's where we derive Jewish law from, right? You have Mishnah, which is really, compilation of statements from the early rabbis explaining what the Torah means. Gemara, commentary on that, from later rabbis asking different questions and etc. Eventually getting to what Jewish law is and what we keep. Right? So that is a combination we call the Talmud. Right? We call the Talmud. And that's the start in the base of all Jewish law. That's where it starts. Then if to now it works, there's a hierarchy, there are early commentators, later commentaries, but it's been codified, the law has been codified. Doesn't mean there's not a difference of opinion. Could be a difference of opinion in some things, but 99% we all agree. Sephardic, Ashkenazic, there are different customs here and there, but basically we all agree. So that's the source. That's the source of what we do. So we have to follow it. Which again, people are going to argue, but that's not the word of God. That's not true. Because that was given to Mount Sinai as well. Because you have to understand, God gives the Torah to Moshe, and Moshe passes it down. Now Moshe Rabbeinu, as great as he is, with 613 commandments, and he got 2 to 3 million people, how long is it going to take Moshe Rabbeinu to give that over? So you're going to say, he'll teach others will teach others. Okay, how long is it going to take to teach all the commandments? So the Jews understand the commandments. 2 years. 5 years. 10 years. I mean, okay, 2 million people is a lot of people. Granted. But if he's only teaching the basics, don't kill, don't steal, this, that, but he's not going really that much into detail, not going to take him that long. Right? So the simple explanation is he's got to be teaching something else. What else is he teaching for all those years? You're not just teaching the basics. So it's also about what future oral law is going to be. And what the mitzvahs are. It breaks them down. And eventually that oral law get written down. Why did it get written down? It's supposed to be oral. So they set up all kinds of chains of people to memorize certain things. Right? To memorize certain things. Why is that? Because when you memorize something, you own it. Right? Use mnemonics, use other things, but when you have to give it over to someone else, it becomes part of you. It's a lot easier. But what was the problem? Problem was, I got an issue, you can't write it down. Should have been written down. Okay. So what happened? Destruction of the temple. Golus, exile. Jews go in exile. So what are the rabbis worried about? What are the rabbis worried about? It's going to get forgotten. So really, it shouldn't be written down. And really, orally, it's going to be stronger. Because you have to remember a lot more. In order to give it over, you have to have it. You have to know it, like the back of your hand. Very good. But they had no choice. Why didn't they have any choice? Because then they wouldn't have written it down, it would have been lost. Pogroms, exile, more pogroms would have been lost. 100% would have been lost. And if this knowledge was lost, what would happen? The Jews would disappear. 100% they would have disappeared. Why? Because now you don't have the law. See, the Zionists got it all wrong. The Zionists think, we got a land. The land's going to keep us together. Why? Why would that be the case? It's like a body without a shell. I would agree. Every nation should have their land, should be free, practice whatever they want. Right? England, being England, French in France, Albanians, Albania, and the Jews in Israel. Even though Herzl would have been happy if we got Uganda, or we got Argentina, or something like that. But okay, we got Israel. So I had somebody tell me, a Jew, I can't make this up because I heard it with my own ears, that they said, the reason there's so many problems in the Middle East, and, we're not going to get political here. But why are there so many problems in the Middle East? Because the Jews are in Israel. I said, okay. I said, you agree that the English can be in England? Yes. French in France? Yes. Albanians in Albania? Yes. Jews in Israel? No. I said, okay, let's try this again. The English in England? Yes. French in, in France? Yes. Italians in Italy? Yeah. Jews in Israel? No. I said, okay, let me ask. If every nation can have their own lands, so where should the Jews go? They say, well, we're the ones causing the problem in the Middle East. Okay, so where should we go? If we're not in Israel, where should we be? So the answer, and again, you can't make this up. The answer was Jews should stay in Israel. Sorry, Jews should have stayed in Europe. I'm like, do you know nothing about, recent history? He said, why? I said, did you ever hear of the Holocaust? Jews tried to stay in Europe, in Russia, whatever. They got slaughtered. All kinds of things. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. That happened to slip their mind. Kind of slipped their mind to drop. Right? But the Jews in the land without a Torah. Right? There are plenty here who think I live in Israel, it's good enough. I don't have to keep Torah mitzvahs. I live in the land. Or they'll say, well, if I live outside the land, it's really only if you live in the land you have to keep Torah mitzvahs. Outside the land, I don't have to. Right? It goes both ways. Lenient on both sides. The problem is we understand that when Jews go far away from their own, from the Torah itself, what happens? They assimilate, they intermarry. They intermarry. That's what they do. And, one of the worst things ever happens, Napoleon allowed the Jews out of the ghettos. He took the Jews out of the ghettos. And what happened? What was the first thing the Jews started to do? Assimilate. That was a disaster. An absolute disaster. So we understand that. We understand assimilation. We understand how it works. But if you're not attached to the source, you're not attached to Torah, what's going to be? You have nothing. That's what these secular Jews have. Nothing. They're quote unquote, as I've heard many times, I'm a cultural Jew. What does that mean? I eat bagels once in a while. Maybe I read the New York Times with a bagel. Maybe I go to synagogue once in a blue moon. Probably not. So they like cultural Jewish things. Does that work? Doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because you can't pass down a feeling. I had somebody once tell me, obviously they're older, they're much older, very, very strong Jewish. But both people, their kids, either all intermarried or almost all of them intermarried. So they said, I can't understand. We're very Jewish. What happened? I said, well, do they have a Jewish education? No. Right, went to Hebrew school a little bit, had a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, as they say, more bar than mitzvah, whatever. That's what they had. But they said, we have this such a strong feeling. So I told them, point blank, I said, well, how do you expect to pass down a feeling? If you, the example was, I said, if you like chocolate and your kid likes vanilla, doesn't like chocolate, how are you going to convince, whoever it is, how are you going to convince them to like vanilla? They don't like chocolate. They don't like chocolate. I had someone once, I had a guest many times for Shabbos. They don't like chocolate, okay? his loss. But how do you convince somebody they have to like chocolate? You're not going to convince them if they don't like chocolate. So you can't pass that down. The only way Torah can be passed down and that it works is through knowledge. Right? So if a person's been properly educated, so they have a much better chance, not a guarantee, nothing's a guarantee in this world, except for death and taxes, not necessarily in that order. But no guarantee. Come from the best family, we can have a kid or two or three, just not be inspired, not want to keep, Judaism. But we have a very high success rate, extremely high success rate. Secular Jewish world, a disaster. 60-70% into marriage. Now, why is that? Simple. There's no education. Parents don't believe it. Nobody believes it, so they don't do it. They give a lip service. Now, if that would be the case, how would Judaism survive? How would it have survived throughout the millennium? The fact that Jews have been gassed and murdered and butchered and all that, it's only because Jews were kept, at least a percentage, kept Torah mitzvahs. More than 250 years ago, everybody was Orthodox. Some more, some less. There was no straddling the line here. Everybody knew what the truth was. Whether they kept it more, they kept it less. So you can't pass down a feeling. Right? And I basically said, either you look like me, you're an Orthodox Jew, you disappear, and that's what's happening. So the answer was, wow, I guess you're right. I guess you can't, pass down a feeling. Not even another piece of pizza. That was it. So Coffman's law is either you do it right, because if you don't do it right, you could get burnt. You could get seriously burnt. And by conversion, all the more so. I can't even tell you how many stories I've heard. That one story. Just one story. Yeah, that was somebody here in Israel. And someone asked me to get involved in this case. They already, kids were already in school. They came back in the law of return, converted in the States. So someone wanted me to learn with them for a certain amount of time, and I did. Took them to a rabbinical court here, here in Israel. And, it was just more or less a formality. But there was an issue with the beis din that they used, which can happen. I mean, I wouldn't say it's so common, but it can happen. There was an impropriety, one of the rabbis there. So they wanted to have a conversion, a stringent conversion, meaning that technically speaking, that rabbi is now invalid. So now you only have two people on the rabbinical court. You need three. Right? Could be, technically, it's still a kosher conversion. But they wanted to, upgrade it. So fine. So I gave some classes, whatever, took them to the rabbinical court, and they went to convert. Now what happened? They asked them a bunch of things, whatever. They go to the mikvah. So the grandfather goes, check, make sure he's been circumcised, not a problem. Right? He goes to dunk. So then his daughter-in-law goes in, and other kids go in, whatever. And then the son over here goes in. Right? Son's got to be in his mid-30s. And he gets checked. He gets checked by the moil, right? By somebody who does circumcision. And he says, we got a problem. I don't know. There was some skin there, whatever. Keep it clean. So I asked this moil. So I said, is it a real problem? Is it a doubt? Well, you're not sure. He goes, no. He goes, I'm going to go to a higher authority. This higher authority wasn't in Israel at the time, but whatever. 2 weeks later, got it checked. And he said, there's no doubt over here, but, I want a second opinion. So what happens? So this other moil comes, checks him, and says, yeah, we got a problem. So the first time it happened, the rabbis there, are yelling at me. They're like, "What'd you do over here?" I said, "Listen, they went to an Orthodox rabbinical court. I had no reason to check. They told me everything was done, everything, kedasu gedin, according to the law. So I had no reason to think there was a problem. I had no reason to think at all." So obviously, when circumcision was done, something got missed. I don't know. Something got missed. So now there's a problem. Now there's a pretty serious problem. What's the problem? The problem is this guy technically, is going for a stringent conversion. Right? So probably his conversion was okay the first time. Okay. But now what's the problem? The problem is his wife now, she's totally 100%. His kids, totally 100%. But the issue more is with his wife. And what about all the dishes? What about all the dishes they took that went to the mikvah? There's a whole question about that status. So there were a number of questions over here. They got taken care of. They got answered up, these issues. So what happened? You'll say all's well that ends well. Well, the person, I don't know, like a week later, a week and a half later, had to, whatever. The more I had to see him, take care of what he needs to take care of. He was laid up for like a week and a half. In the end, it worked out. What's the point? Right? What's the point over here? The point is, as Coffman's law is, you do it right, or don't bother. I'm not going to say anything in between. I am an extremist to a certain extent, right? But what's the problem? The problem is it looks dicey. And if it looks dicey, not everyone's going to accept it. So now someone will say, but is there 100% guarantee? Can I put down on paper? Is it 100% guaranteed that a rabbinical court that you're going to go to, you're not going to have issues with? So I can't say 100%. I would say it's a pretty high percentage that nothing's going to happen, that it should be fine. Can it be somehow it gets revoked or potentially? Maybe. What happens? I'll give you an example. Someone's been doing conversions for years. In the last, let's say 10, 15 years more, their conversions have been problematic in different ways. Now, what do you do about all the conversions previous? It's also a pretty serious question. Do we say all of them are bad and they all have to convert stringently? Or do you take, or most likely you take it case by case? Now, I know when this happens, I know of one person, they went through a stringent conversion because of this. I don't know how many did. Doesn't really matter. Point is, was that foreseen? I don't know. Maybe some people foresaw it, but probably not too many because they were accepted all over. It can be done. Not going to say not. What would happen? Let's say I had a case like this also. Someone went in front of not a basement. Wasn't really a basement. They went in front of, 3 kosher Jews, which the Rambam says, technically, really, you shouldn't do it. Right? You really shouldn't, the Rambam says, that it could be done. If you had 3 kosher Jews, should be okay. What's the problem? The problem is they may be fine people, but who says they know anything about Geiris? Who says they know anything about conversion? Technically, you'd have to look at, I asked, a great rabbi, a few years ago, this question. Do we say across the board, according to the Rambam, if they did it, it's okay? He said, no, you don't say across the board. You have to check. You have to check case by case. That's someone screaming at me and said, but I could get 3 kosher Jews. You're right, you could get 3 kosher Jews, but it won't be accepted. And this person, I told him eventually you have to move. And he moved. He didn't go back to the States. He was in China or whatever. right? They were both non-Jewish, whatever. They ended up converting. Fine. But someone else, so the person was jumping up and down, said, yeah, what about the Rambam? I said, what about him? Don't we hold like the Rambam? Not necessarily. Right? We don't always hold according to the Rambam here, but again, it's a case-by-case basis. It's not something someone should strive for. That's the point. We're not striving to weasel our way out and say, okay, technically it's okay. Now, it might be, but there are other ramifications. Most people are not going to accept it. Certainly, a rabbinical court is going to look into it. They're probably going to have a proper conversion anyway afterwards. That's probably going to be the case. But they could say, yeah, it's fine. We checked it out. They did what they were supposed to do. Fine. Playing with fire. They had someone who did this. They didn't even go through a proper rabbinical court. And I understand why they did it to a certain extent. And they said, they said, well, I understand the repercussions. Okay? You understand the repercussions. But not going to be accepted according to anybody. You say, well, if they check it out and it's okay, again, it may be okay. The question is, someone want to play Russian roulette over here. And it made sense to a certain extent why the person did it. But then they ran into all kinds of problems. Right? The problems aren't worth it. Because later down the line, it certainly can and probably will be questioned. Now, the question would be also, if I go to one rabbinical court, let's say other rabbinical courts don't accept it. Okay, it's also true. This is not one universal rabbinical court, it's accepted by everybody. Some like more, some like less. There's no clear-cut standard. Some have more standards, some have less standards. So I would say if someone's going to do it, you want to go to a place that, has a pretty high standard, that it shouldn't be questioned. Now, is that a guarantee? No. Definitely not going to say it's a guarantee. Right? But there's a good chance you shouldn't have an issue. I can tell you in the last 13 years, anywhere I've sent anyone, there hasn't been an issue. Now, does that mean in the future, somewhere down the line, something could happen? Something could. Something could. I'm not saying not. And there are people that, let's say, are not necessarily accepted by the chief rabbinate here in Israel, and their conversions are okay. There are some people that are, that are accepted and they're questionable. Right? So, there's nothing that's foolproof, except death and taxes. That's foolproof. So, to the best of our ability, we try and make sure there are no issues. Doesn't mean it can't happen. Right? But that's part of what I do to make sure it doesn't happen. There could be, just throw out there could be extenuating circumstances where, you might, there might be some leniencies done for certain things. But if you had a choice and everyone in that situation would agree, then if they had a choice, they wouldn't do it this way. But whatever, there are different circumstances. So nobody going through this process, wants to look over their shoulder. I would think it's not worth it. Because then it calls everything into question. And then you're stuck in limbo. I've had people that, went to a certain rabbinical court and then upgraded. Went to a different rabbinical court because they wanted to have a better name. There are different reasons for doing it. At the same time, I would say I don't think people want to look over their shoulder and second guess. And say, maybe it's good, maybe it's not. So someone's going to say, that mean I have to have 5 different conversions, 5 different rabbinical courts? No. If it's done right in a proper place, you shouldn't have that issue. Maybe there's some rabbinical courts that don't like that one. Okay, depends. Nothing's 100% foolproof, right? But there are things that, as the English would say, it's dodgy. And if it's dodgy, again, people can make their own decisions. I'm not into dodge. I'm not into relying on things you shouldn't necessarily rely on unless you have to. I'm very what they'll call, I call it the way I see it, and that's it. Because I've seen people get burnt. It's not worth it. Now, again, people can say, well, I want to do this, I want to do that. Okay. It's their choice. People make all kinds of choices. I wouldn't be the first one to say, well, see, look what happened. Right? I'm not going to say that. People make their own choice. Everyone's got free will. But if something, is off the beaten track and is not mainstream, you're going to have issues. 100% you're going to have issues. Now, that somebody in such a situation, they may not care. Say, okay, so what? I know what I'm getting into, okay? Realize there's a big world out there. The world's of conversion not so big. Right? Definitely not so big. But people know. People in the know. They know what's good, they know what's better. If they don't, they know what to ask. So people have to know what's out there. And unfortunately, there are a number of people waste a lot of time, a lot of money, got sold a bag of bones because they didn't investigate enough. That can happen also. God forbid someone should get burned. But there are people who get burned also. Someone asks, wait, did I answer the whole question? 1 second. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other statements, but whatever. I'm not going to answer the other things here. Somebody asked, a lot of good questions here. Somebody asks, I heard that rabbis of old times talk to the dead, believe the reincarnation, perform black magic. Now, performing black magic should be forbidden. Because in general, sorcery is forbidden. So I don't know where that's going to come from. But sorcery 100% for Jews and pretty much for non-Jews also. For Noah, it's going to be forbidden. Reincarnation, definitely a Jewish concept. Regardless of what anyone, regardless of whatever anyone's going to tell you. Definitely a Jewish concept. It's a lot of Kabbalah, right? It's brought down in Jewish mysticism. So you can read the book Derech Hashem, The Way of God, speaks about it. The Ramchal speaks about it. How spiritual forces work and the evil inclination and how a person could come back, as a reincarnated into, all kinds of things. That's definitely a real thing. I remember I gave a class in the JCC in the Jewish Community Center. I was interviewing for a job in the synagogue. So I spoke about reincarnation. So someone asked me, and they said, what, you're going to speak about the 5 levels of the soul? And this, I said, no, I'm going to speak about the evil inclination, the good inclination. I'll probably speak about that for like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and how all that works and repercussions for our actions. And then for 10 minutes, I'll speak about reincarnation. But the first thing I did when I got up there to speak, I said, I just want everyone to know, and there were about, 20 people there, 25 people there. I said, I just want everyone to know reincarnation is a Jewish concept. And like 3 people fainted. Gave some smelling salts, came back to life. They're a really interesting thing. They said, what do you mean? It's a Jewish concept. I said, it's a Jewish concept. We came before anyone else. Where do you think they got it from? They just butchered it. The other so-called religions demolished it, in different ways. But a person, can come back to this world. We're probably not the first time we're here. Probably the second time, third time. So I've heard either we can come back 3 times or potentially 4 times, But this is probably our last Torah. Whatever we need to fix up, whatever our soul's been through, we have to fix up. This is the last chance. Pretty much the last chance. So reincarnation, 100% a Jewish concept. Now, I have heard, someone said, well, is it a Jewish concept? Like, do I have to believe in reincarnation? I mean, it is a Jewish concept. It is brought down according to Kabbalah. That was the other question. Do I have to believe in Kabbalah? Right? So, I give a whole talk on Tanakh talk. We all buy Kabbalah. Not saying people should learn it until they're ready to learn it. You have to have a lot of knowledge to be able to learn it. So I always say you can't study, you can't learn calculus if you don't have algebra and trig, right? You have to learn algebra, trigonometry. You can't run before you learn how to crawl. So, if someone wants to learn that, yeah, that's definitely not for now. You need a lot of years of learning. Now, is it true they talk to the dead? I mean, it's happened. You see the story with Samuel the prophet, right? Bringing up, his witches or whatever, right? That's a whole story in of itself, right? But in general, we don't do it. Ouija boards, all these things. Again, I did a whole video on that on Tanakh Talk. You can check it out. So, these things are real if you know what you're doing. The Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, you don't need a whole lot of knowledge. You just need to know how to tap in, right? To use certain names of God or whatever, you need to be on a higher spiritual level. To use, let's say, from the dark side, which God allowed the dark side to be there, okay? Not saying he wants you to do it, but if a person did it, they can have certain power. They can have power over certain angels and different things. It's not what God wants. So why did God create it? Temptation. Give us free will. We all have free will. Person wants to tap into it in a negative way, they can. If not, they shouldn't tap into it, but he gives us free will. If people couldn't do terrible things or go against their evil inclination or go do what their evil inclination wants, then we wouldn't have free will. We'd be robots. God has plenty of robots in the world. And animals, plants, stars, planets, they're all doing God's will. None of them have free will. They can't do whatever they want. Right? Otherwise, God wouldn't be absolute. It's like he's giving them power outside of him, which goes against first and 13 principles. The fact that God is absolute, which a lot of people, including Pharaoh, made a big mistake. And what did they say? Yeah, God created the world. God's the one in charge. Well, guess what? He disappeared and he put other things in control. But, he created them, okay? So he created these things. Great. Doesn't mean they have independent power. And if the Atlantic Ocean wants to make a tsunami, make an earthquake and all that, God can say yay or nay. And if God says no, it's not going to happen. They don't have free will. Then we don't have free will. So yeah, it is true. They were in contact, with the dead. I'm not saying they brought up the dead every second of every day and this and that. Right? Perform black magic? No. That would be forbidden. That is sorcery. Sorcery is forbidden. It's forbidden for a Jew. It's forbidden for a non-Jew. Right? Non-Jews also be forbidden. Someone asks, back on conversion, if a Chabad rabbi sponsors a person, he isn't technically converting. Is he allowed to? Yeah, he is. Right? There are two things. You need someone to teach you, obviously. And you need what they call a sponsoring rabbi. Sponsoring rabbi is somebody who's going to vouch for you to say they keep Shabbos, they keep kosher, they live in my community, they can vouch for them. Not necessarily something I can do, but, since I don't live where most people live, I can certainly write a letter of recommendation. That's worth something. Definitely worth a lot, for that. But Chabad does not normally do conversion. In the last 13 years, I know of one person who went through a Chabad rabbinical court or a Chabad based in that converted them. That's unheard of. Pretty much unheard of. I'm not saying it can't happen, but in general, they don't do conversion, right? So you need a sponsoring rabbi, that's for sure. Right? Now, does that mean the sponsoring rabbi is going to be on the base there? Doesn't mean that. Doesn't have to be on the base. Right? And at a fraudster, take a shot at me. He doesn't even have his own base there. What do I need to have my own base in? I can't give classes at my own base, if I don't have my own base in. I could sit on a basin for conversion. That wouldn't be an issue, right? That wouldn't be an issue. But I have my own basin. That doesn't disqualify me, not by any stretch, right? So even if he doesn't do the conversion, he can sponsor you. And most sponsoring rabbis don't do the conversion. Usually, it's a separate entity. This basin for conversion is usually, other people, not them. Usually, it's not them. That's the way it normally works. Someone asks, what does Jewish eschatology tell about our milus? Our milus, as far as I understand, there's a lot of, there's a song at the end of the Passover Seder called Chad Gadya, right? That the song, we sing is that whatever. It's a whole thing that he had one kid, goats, so to speak. It goes one little goat, which my father brought for 2 zuzim, just a small amount of money, right? And then you say one little goat, and the dog came, bit the cat that ate the goat, and whatever, this whole thing, right? This whole thing. And then you get the slaughter, who's the shochet, the one who ritually slaughters. He killed the ox, drank the water, put out the fire, burned the stick, and beat the dog. Now the slaughterer over here, let's say better. Many say that the ox is a reference to Joseph. It's a reference to Yosef a tzaddik. And then it says the slaughterer comes and kills the ox. Now here we have a representation, looks like I'm not gonna say meaningless, but whatever. You have this song over here. Again, the water came, put out the fire, burned the stick, to beat the dog, bit the cat, they ate the goat. It's funny after a long day and going through all this. In any case, it says slaughterer came, killed the ox. Now some say this is a reference that Mashiach ben Yosef, the Messiah of Yosef, there are 2 Messiahs. One of Yosef, one of David. The one of Yosef could die. Now, the difference of opinion, the Gemara in Sukkah, 52a, I think, 52a, it says, there's a difference of opinion whether the Messiah of Yosef dies or not. Now, the Messiah of David, we mentioned last week, he can't die. Right? That was a mistake. That was a mistake Rabbi Kiva made by Bar Kokhba, or Bar Koziva, as he is known. When he was killed in the rebellion, Rabbi Kiva said, I made a mistake. I thought it was a Messiah. So you see, the Messiah can't die. And the Rambam there says, the Messiah can't die. So the Messiah of Yosef could die. Right? So there's a hint over here, as I've seen brought down, that the slaughterer comes and kills the ox. Who's the ox? Yosef. Who's the slaughterer? This creature seemed to be called Armilus. What is Armilus? At least the little that I know. Sounds very much, almost like a unicorn, like a cyclop in a certain way. I want to say cyclop. It sounds like a unicorn. One big eye, maybe unibrow. Not exactly sure. But he comes and kills Yosef. Right? That's what I know. You do more research, see what other sources say. But that there's a hint over there in that song, Haggadah, that Armilus is going to kill Yosef. It's Armilus, some sort of, I'm not going to say it's a monster. I don't know exactly what it is. Some sort of animal. I don't know. Yeah, it sounds like some sort of unicorn or something big, one eye. I don't know. Don't know. But that's what's brought down there. Somebody asks, one second here. Someone asks, is it okay to take time while converting? People think or on that topic, I want to convert as quickly as possible. Doesn't work that way. And a person lives in a community, doesn't, not going to be so quick, right? I would say minimum of at least a couple of years, definitely a couple of years. But I would say, if someone's got issues, health issues, mental health issues, yeah, you got to deal with that also. Definitely have to deal with that also. So person can learn, what about, I had this question, what about, somebody who's, let's say, bipolar? I know some people that are bipolar function, not a problem. Obviously, that would have to be told to the patient. The person on medication and they see therapists, regularly, whatever. So if that's the case, it shouldn't be a problem. Right. But again, things have to be dealt with. They doesn't mean you have to have, 100%, whatever, but, there are issues definitely that, most likely should be dealt with. If a person, is on the verge of a breakdown, or something like that. Yeah. I mean, keep in mind one thing, that you're in this process. It's not an endless process. It's not going to be a quick process. It's not an endless process, right? In some places it could take, 3, 4, 5 years, even if you live in a Jewish community, but it's not an endless process. So the only problem is that if a person's ready to convert, this is straight from the Gemara. If a person's ready to convert and they don't convert, then they're penalized severely. Now, you're going to say, but what if they have mental health issues? What if they have other issues? We're not talking about owners. We're talking about they're ready, they've moved, they've done what they need to do, they're ready to convert. And a Beis Din will convert them. We'll make it easy. A Beis Din is going to convert them. So if a Beis Din 100% is going to convert them, then there should be then why aren't they converted? Now I've asked this a number of times to people. They tell me I've been in the process for 10 years. I'm like, what have you been doing for 10 years? So, but then there are a lot of other issues that they didn't move to a community, they got sidetracked, lost their job, had no money. A lot of different things. Legitimate things. I'm not saying not legitimate things. They're not just pushing it off. Sometimes the person can take a step back, get burnt out. It's too much. I need a little bit of a break, okay? Right? But keep in mind one thing. And for most people, it shouldn't be an issue because a lot of people got a long time before they're going to actually convert, before they have a certain level of knowledge. And what's that? And that is if they're really ready. If they're really ready and they push it off, that's a problem. If they're not ready, there are other issues, that's not an issue, right? Let's say someone really wanted to convert, their spouse didn't want to convert. Let's say. Or they were involved in a relationship and whatever, and something happened and they got held back. Is that going to be held against them? No. Because they couldn't. At that point, they couldn't. There are people out there that, marriage goes sour, whatever happens. They wanted to convert, they couldn't convert. Now they're ready. Doesn't mean they haven't been living in a community. Let's say they've been living in a community or whatever. Now they're ready. But why couldn't they convert before? God's not going to zap them for that and severely punish them because they couldn't. There was no possible way for them to convert. So that they're not going to be held accountable. That for sure they won't be held accountable. But if someone's ready to convert, they have the requisite knowledge, they live in a community or they can move or whatever, and they don't, that, again, each case is going to be judged by itself. But, the Gemara says if a person does such a thing and they're ready to convert and they don't, all things being equal, they're in big trouble. But if a person has other issues, mental health issues, they can't move, other things, so that's not going to be held against them. And not everyone can do everything at once. You go nuts. Like I had somebody tell me, I'm on the road a lot. Can you give me like a few months worth of classes? I'm like, that's going to blow your brains out. 16 classes, let's say. 17, 18, 19 hours. A lot of details. You got to take it in sound bites. Can't do it, you got to say, I'm so excited, whatever. I want to do everything at once. That's called Moreno Rabbeinu the Eight Sahara. That's the evil inclination. The evil inclination will destroy you. Totally destroy you because then you can't do it. Right? And it's, and a person, let's say, throw out this example. Person wants to start going to synagogue 3 times a day. It's taxing. 100%. You got to change your day around. Right? If you have an obligation to pray 3 times a day, all you men out there, if you want to be Jewish. So yeah, you got to plan it. Your day gets planned around when you wake up, when you go to synagogue, work, you got to work it out. Pray in the afternoon, pray at night, it's late, this, that, you got to work it out. But yeah, it's hard, it's frustrating, I'm tired. You're right, there are a lot of other factors. So I tell people, get used to doing certain things, but not overkill. Because if it's overkill, you get burnt. You get burnt out. If a person's been doing it for a while and this and that, okay. You can still get burnt out. Then a person has to really think. You say, okay, I can't go back and be a Christian. Okay. You have an option of being a Noahide. Some people get so burnt out and there's so much knowledge and whatever that it's just too much. There are some people that just flake out because, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in general. Why? Because it's just too much. Too much to know. Too hard. There's just so many other factors. So many other factors. Right? At the same time, and I get this question a lot also, Messiah is coming right around the corner. We're living in the Messianic era. Everyone agrees. So people say, I don't want to miss out. Also true. Right? But again, there's a good reason Basin's going to take their time. Because they want to make sure a person's 100%. They know what they're doing. And they're willing to do it no matter what. Self-sacrifice. They want to see all that. They want to see you go through the cycle of all the holidays and this and that. But it's, again, I'm not saying anything against anybody. I have no choice because I grew up as a Jew. Right? But if someone's going to take this on, you have to know 100% what you're getting into in all the details. There's a lot of detail. If a person says, PK, and I still want to do it, okay, but take it in sound bites. And I can tell you one very important fact. That if you start doing something, be consistent. Whatever it is, whether it's praying once a day, kashrus, other things, be consistent. Don't flip-flop. Because if you flip-flop, what's the evil inclination going to say? You do this sometimes, then you don't do it, then this, then that. Right now, you don't have an obligation to do anything as a JIT. As a Jew in training, you got no obligation to do nothing. So they're going to say, okay, so why am I taking classes? Because you want to learn. Because you want to learn what to do. Do you have an obligation to keep anything? No. You don't have an obligation, but if you want to practice and you want to know what it means to be a Jew, you got to put in action. Every last detail, I'm not saying every last detail. Depends where a person's holding. But you can't do everything at once. You go crazy. The evil inclination 100% will destroy you. If not, you have nightmares of me screaming at you. Why are you doing that? And then you blame me. The evil inclination will destroy you. But consistency is important. 100%. Even if it's something very small. You do it at a regular basis, you get used to doing it. But again, you want to make sure you're not just doing it by rote. You're not just going through the motions. Right? But consistency is an important thing. Someone asks, how do you separate Kabbalistic thinking from mysticism? I don't know. There's a difference between practice, Kabbalistic practice, and Kabbalistic thought. Some people learn the Zohar like a medrash. Okay, very nice, but they don't apply it in Kabbalistic terms. Living on the Kabbalistic level is a whole, whatever. It's not for now. It's a whole different thing altogether. There are some things we see brought down according to Kabbalah, this, that, okay. But we're not practicing Kabbalah. You read the book Derech Hashem, that's steeped in Kabbalah, but all the class I gave were not, we're not Kabbalistically inclined. Just explain what he meant, at a face value. Very simple level. There are multiple levels, right? So understanding certain things, fine, but, just learning something today that, certainly has Kabbalah in it. So, I'm taking things out when I need to get out of it. The other things, they talk about the 10 spiritual worlds and how this affects this and that affects that. Okay, but we got the other points that I need to get to. So that I sort of looked at, took with a grain of salt, and took what I needed to take out of it. But knowing, even if a person has a certain understanding, let's say they have a certain understanding, doesn't mean they're practicing Kabbalah. On the other hand, I've seen people probably can't read Hebrew too well, quoting Kabbalistic sources, which they should never do. I wouldn't believe for 1 second they know what in the world they're talking about. They can say the words, they can say it represents this and it's like that, whatever. Their explanation, I'm not even going to bother listening to, because they don't even know, they barely know Aleph Beit. Right? Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem. And people have a big ego, capital E, capital G, and capital O, and think they know a lot more than they do. That's a big problem. That's whatever that I've spoken about. That's a big problem. But to see some people quote this stuff, I mean, come on. If I had a remote control and I was watching TV and that came on, click, next station. Oh, his friend's doing it. Click, right? You go further. I mentioned before, I see someone making videos and whatever. I should really confront the person myself, but just a waste of time. And quote things and different things and whatever, and they can't read Hebrew, for goodness sakes. They butcher every single Hebrew word. So that's just a major turnoff. Why would I take someone seriously if they can't even read Hebrew? And not only that, why are you making videos anyway? Why aren't you learning? Why are you wasting time learning? Oh, I want to make videos. I want to spread the word. Sit and learn, for goodness sakes. Learn how to read Hebrew. Do me a favor. Learn how to read Hebrew. It's not about ego. It bothers me. It bothers me to no end. People sitting there wasting time on social media. You can say, you're also on social media. Yeah, okay. I have my own reasons, right? But I'm also learning a good part of the day and doing other things. This person's not, they're learning 6, 7, 8 hours a day. I don't think so. And even learning 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, great. So do it. Why are you wasting time making videos? Can't even pronounce Hebrew. Someone asked, lavash bread considered as mizonos or hamotzi? I don't know what it is. I don't know what type of bread. Let me see if I get a definition here. 1 second. Let me see what's in it. Made of flour, water, and salt. Okay. If it's flour, water, and salt, then it's bread. Right? If you tell me it's something made from corn flour, something like that, then, even if you made it into bread, it's shackle. Why? Because it's not flour, not real flour. It's ground up corn, right? So it wouldn't even be hadama because corn is not recognizable. In order for bread to be hamotzi, it's got to be one of the 5 grains: wheat, barley, spelt, rye, or oats. If it's not one of the 5 grains, it's not hamotzi. You could have, you could have bread made out of rice. That'd be, could be mizonos, right? But flour and water, nothing to talk about, right? It's like what a pita is, right? That's bread. That's considered like bread. So that would be hamotzi. If it's made of something else outside the 5 grains, it wouldn't be hamotzi in general. Someone here says, sorry, I laughed there. Someone says, story about the spirit of Shabtai Tzvi. Yeah, Shabtai Tzvi almost destroyed Judaism as we know it. One of the false messiahs. And he took possession of a Jewish man. The rabbi had to get his spirit out. That's something else. That's called the D-book. I also spoke about that on Tanakh Talk. A D-book will just say, it doesn't happen all that often, but basically a soul that cannot get its true reward, or at least go to Gehenna, go to hell to get judged for whatever reason it's running, that this soul is like about to get destroyed by what do you call it, destructive angels, and the only place it can find where it's going to be safe is in someone else's body, right? It can take over another soul in that body. That soul is still there, but it gets taken over. That's called the dibuk, right? Now, dibuk's not so common, but there are ways. There are ways to get it out. That's not speaking to the dead per se. I mean, that, what does that dibuk do? That soul speaks through the mouth of that person. In other words, that other soul, wherever it is at that point, is not in control. So this soul, is speaking through the mouth of this person. It's not speaking to the dead. I mean, technically, that soul is dead, right? But that's not sorcery we're talking about. We're talking about bringing up, using a Ouija board, other things to bring up, souls. That's sorcery. If there's already a soul in the body and you want to get the soul out, if someone, knows Kabbalah, can do it or whatever, that's one thing, right? But that's not sorcery over here. Someone asked about a cat. One second. Why is Torah not in chronological order? Doesn't have to be. Right? Many commentators say there are questions why the Torah seems to be out of order. Right? The Moshe Rabbeinu did not write the Torah in the exact sequence it happened. Right? So now you might ask, so why not? He didn't. Who said he had to? He didn't write every last thing that happened exactly when it happened. He put it in wherever he put it in. There are questions that the commentaries ask. Why, give one example. All the laws of Shabbos we learn out from the Mishkan, from the tabernacle. Now, what's going on? What's going on with the tabernacle? Why do we learn it out that way? Because the book of Exodus, there are many chapters speaks about building the tabernacle, all the loops, the clasps, the beams, the this, the that. And then in Parshas Vayakil, chapter 39, it talks about the laws of Shabbos. So I'd say Makesher, right? Well, what's the connection? So Rashi asked the question, what's it doing over here? Don't we already know the laws of Shabbos before? Book of Exodus, chapter 19, chapter 20, right? Brought down a number of places. Why did he bring laws of Shabbos over here? It's out of order. Keep all the laws of Shabbos together, all the laws of festival together, all the laws of Truma, Mice, or other things together. But there are different reasons why they're not put all together. So Rashi asks on the spot, what's going on? And he says, because anything that was done in the tabernacle is going to be forbidden on Shabbos. Doesn't supersede Shabbos. Otherwise, what's the verse doing there? There's another thing. The Torah says that you have to honor your parents. Then it says you have to keep Shabbos. So if there's juxtaposition of verses, then what's it doing here? Right? In other words, certain laws should be together, other laws should be together. The commentaries say, if your parents will tell you that's a great Shabbos, you don't listen to them. Right? 100%, you don't listen to them. People will say it's the 10 Commandments. You got to honor your parents. Yeah, one of the 10 Commandments, keep Shabbos also. So you got to listen to your parents or God. You're going to listen to God. You're not going to listen to your parents in that case. No obligations. A mitzvah not to listen to them. Now, you got to be respectful, but there's a mitzvah not to listen to them. Somebody asks, one second here. Someone asks, can I explain the inner teachings of the Shemona Esrei? That would take me way too long, but I will say the most important thing of the Shemona Esrei, the silent meditation, whatever you want to call it, right, that we say every day, Jews at least say every day. What do we ask for? We ask for wisdom of spiritual wisdom. What, if I don't pray for wisdom, I'm not, I'm going to be stupid? No, it means spiritual wisdom. I know God's love. I understand what he wants from me. Pray for livelihood, right? We pray for redemption, spiritual redemption, physical redemption, pray against people that want to harm us, right? All kinds of things. I'll tell you what I asked my Rebbe, and I'll tell you what he answered. the Mishnah Berurah says, and when it comes to the Shemona Esrei, silent meditation, whatever you want to call it. So the Mishnah Berurah says, what's the most important thing to know? And he says what the words mean. Just what it means. What am I saying? So I asked my Rebbe the following question. Okay. I said, what should my intention be? He said exactly what the Mishnah Berurah says, what the words mean. And I said, and he goes, for you, that's enough. So I would say, I mean, there are books to read on prayer, many books to read, on prayer, and how it works and all that. But for the Shemona Esrei itself, what's the most important thing? Know exactly what I'm saying. Even if you can't read Hebrew, know more or less what it says, what the words say. And think about it. Think about having more livelihood or enough livelihood, or sickness, people that are sick. You delve in, you think about it a little bit while you go through it. Spiritual redemption. You can walk downtown 1 block away from where the Western Wall is, and we can understand why the Messiah hasn't come. Right? See how people are dressed and what they're doing and, whatever. So we need redemption. We need spiritual redemption. We need physical redemption. We need to wipe out certain groups. Certain groups should be wiped out, should have no power. That are destroying Judaism. And other things. Right? So, that's what I would say. There are good books to read on it. But again, for the Shemona Esrei itself, just think into what it means. Like I say, but how do I know what it means? Again, there are general things that we can think about. But, we all know people that are sick. We all know people that need, livelihood, maybe ourselves included. Right? We all know what redemption we need, what the Jewish people need, etc. We know that we don't have a sacrificial service. We're missing that. I mean, there's a lot to think about, but, obviously you have to say it in a certain amount of time. So, when you have time, you contemplate on some of these ideas. Somebody asks, 1 second. Will direct a candidate to a non-Chabad based in for conversion. Again, let's make clear, even if it's a Chabad rabbi who's a sponsoring rabbi, most, if not all, Chabad rabbinical courts do not do conversion. They won't do conversion. So that you don't have to worry about. They'll take you to another rabbinical court, but Chabad does not do conversion. So they're not going to direct you to a Chabad based because they don't do conversion. Someone asked, can I sponsor a Gentile who wants to convert in Israel? Well, if they get here in theory, right? But, I've gotten this question a lot that, people want a visa. I just, recommend them for a visa and this and that. That's, I can make a recommendation, but if I don't know the person from Adam, I'm not going to do that. I've had a number of people do that. I can't tell if some people are real or not. If a person got here, it's one thing, right? Say, but you need a recommendation, you need to learn in the community, you need this. Okay. In some places, you can't do that. In some places, it's a lot harder because, either there is no community or there are no classes, they're not learning. And certainly here in Israel, there's a place in Jerusalem that will take converts or potential converts, but they have to be learning for at least a year somewhere, in a I guess what I'd say a proper institution, so I think something's recognized. So they're going to say, well, wouldn't your classes help that? In some ways they would, but I don't necessarily deal with the chief rabbinate directly, but, if someone goes, I certainly can do that, but it doesn't, not necessarily, a guarantee, but I would say that if someone goes in, even to the chief rabbinate here in Israel, and they show knowledge, and they may say, well, I don't know who this person is, doesn't matter. If they show knowledge and they start asking them questions, they're not just going to say, wow, you have to start from scratch, you're a nobody because we don't know who this person is. It's certainly not true. I mean, if they did that, that'd be an act of cruelty, a total act of cruelty, which I haven't seen done except in certain rabbinical courts that have their own teachers. They won't recognize anybody outside of their own teachers. Okay. That's their choice. That's definitely their choice. But certainly, as people have said, well, I want extra knowledge and this and that, that's fine. Right? As long as people understand it's not 100% a given, in certain places, that's true. But again, if a person shows a certain level of knowledge, a different issue. Different issue. And then if they say, well, where'd you get this knowledge from? And then, you mentioned a person's name. They may not know who it is, but they certainly might be impressed. No question. But if it's a rabbinical court, let's say that already knows the person, let's say they know me, and they say, oh, you're one of his students? Yeah, it's a lot easier. A heck of a lot easier. Because, they don't have to go through a lot of red tape. They may ask me some questions, different things, but the merit for the conversion is going to be on the person and what they know or what they don't know. Right? But that recommendation is going to go, is going to go a long way. Because, if I have a reputation and my reputation's good, in most places, then, that's worth a lot. That's definitely worth, it's definitely worth a lot. And even say, well, we don't know who this person is, but they show they have knowledge in what they're keeping and what they're doing. So, it doesn't matter, let's say, who they learned from, per se, but if they have the knowledge, then that's also good. Somebody asks, how does the tikkun nefesh work in order to get health in each part of the body? So meditation, not my thing. There's a book by Rabbi Chaim Coffman on meditation. I would definitely recommend that, but that's not, how to fix each part of the body through meditation. That's beyond me. Yeah. Any other questions? Someone asked about a domesticated cat that's used, let's say, for mental illness. Something like that. So if they're domesticated, so fine, no problem with trapping them, etc. And she still mooks on Shabbos. So again, if you can touch the cat without moving the cat, so many would say that's okay. If they don't move, inevitably they're going to move. Others would say if you can touch the cat or dog or whatever animal, they don't move, it's not a problem. It's still mooks. Right? We still hold necessarily there. Mooks, the problem is that they're going to move. Right? So touching them, technically, I could touch them. I could touch an animal. Some will say you're allowed to touch an animal even if they do move. Right? But if we hold that they're mooks, you touch it, they don't move, fine. But I would think any animal you're going to touch is probably going to move. If they don't move, then you don't have a problem. Right? To touch them. Again, touching them won't necessarily be a problem. Touching them and they move, that's more of a problem. But again, there are rabbinical authorities say it's okay. Right? If you touch them and they move, that's, wouldn't be an issue. And if someone uses them for mental illness, and they need to cuddle or whatever, whatever with this animal, so then that wouldn't be an issue either. That would be much less of an issue. If you let your dog go out on Shabbos, it's muksa even if you don't let it go out on Shabbos. What's the difference if you let it go out or not? Right? The only question is, do you have to touch it? Dog is muksa in either case, right? In general, right? Because it has no use for me in general. So it'd be muksa anyway. But you let the dog out, so okay. Well, what's the difference? What's the difference if they're in the house or outside the house? That status doesn't change. That status won't change. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to sign out. I just every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Rabbi Chaim Coffman or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. You can send me an email, rabbichaimcoffman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com. Wish everyone a good beginning of the day or middle of the day.